Hey, Spellenites. Hey, y'all. It's Dean G coming for week 2. Well, technically week 3 of Women's History Month worship, but week 2 in this format. And thank you all so much for your engagement last week. There was so much great feedback, and I'm really glad that it was a blessing. And today we're back with another amazing preacher, amazing leader, thought leader, faith leader, none other than the one and only Pastor Nadia Bolz-Weber, who is, I'm blessed to call my sister and my friend. And for those of you who were in attendance at my installation service at Spellman, then you had the opportunity to bear witness to her amazing ministry when she gave the benediction at the end in Sisters Chapel. And I've just been wanting to bring her back to chapel ever since. And so, Nadia, I'm so happy that you are with us today.
I'm really happy to be here too. I am so sad because I was really excited to preach at Sisters Chapel, but you promised me it'll still happen.
I promise. I promise.
And also, I was supposed to get my makeup done by Whitney Bond, so it'll still happen.
It'll still happen.
Yeah.
You know, Whitney's on the Sisters Chapel team, in addition to being Spellman alum, class of 08. So all of this is on deck for 2021. Okay.
Yep.
And you're gonna, Pastor Nadia is gonna share with us out of an amazing story about a woman in the scriptures that we all know and love. But before she does that, I wanted to share a couple of words about Pastor Nadia. Nadia Bolz-Weber is an ordained Lutheran pastor, founder of House for All Saints and Sinners in Denver, Colorado, and the author of 3 New York Times best-selling memoirs: Pastrix, The Cranky, Beautiful Faith of the Sinner and Saint, 2013, Accidental Saints, Finding God in All the Wrong People, 2015, and Shameless, A Sexual Reformation, 2019. She writes and speaks about personal failings, recovery, grace, faith, and really whatever the hell she wants to. She always sits in the corner with the other weirdos. And I can say that one of the things I love so much about you, Nadia, is the space that you create for a whole bunch of us who are thinking and talking about Jesus in ways that rebel against the status quo and really reach to become the inclusive, not lust, but just and loving body that Christ would want us to be, maybe less too, somewhere in there. We'll talk about that another time. And so I'm really happy that you're with us. So I'm gonna read your text, which is about the Samaritan woman who meets Jesus at a well in John chapter 4. Do you have any preferred translations, Nadia?
No, whatever you'd like is fine.
Okay, I'm going to pull up the New Revised Standard Version, and I'll start with verse 7. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. And the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans." And Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." And the woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? And are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well, and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" And Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming back here to draw this water. And Jesus said to her, go call your husband and come back. And the woman answered him, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, you are right in saying, I have no husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true. And the woman said to him, sir, I see that you are a prophet. Dropping down now to verse 11. Just then, Jesus' disciples came. They were astonished that he was speaking with a woman, but no one said, what do you want? Or why are you speaking with her? And then the woman left her water jar and went back to the city. She said to the people, come and see a man who told me everything I've ever done. He cannot be the Messiah, can he? And they left the city and were on their way to him. God's word for God's people.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
One thing I love about this story is that in all the Gospels, this is the longest conversation Jesus has with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
In all 4 Gospels, it's with this woman who's an ethnic outsider and a woman who's had 5 husbands and like ticks all the boxes for the exact kind of person that a nice Jewish boy should not be seen talking to. And yet, not only does he talk to her, he talks to her for a longer amount of time than he talks to anyone else, which I've always thought was a comfort to me. So I was recently having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she was talking about keeping a diary. And she has this book that she writes down her thoughts about her lovers and her concerns about things and what she thinks and feels and all this stuff. And I was like, oh man, I don't know, like keeping a diary feels super dangerous, because what if someone reads like all my secrets? And she's like, oh my God, Nadia, you have published worse things about yourself in your memoirs. Like anybody with an Amazon link can read your secrets. I thought, oh, that's true. But really it's only partly true. I mean, that's the thing about people who are like self-revealing, is that it's a PR management program. I mean, the fact that I readily admit my faults and my failings is kind of like copping to a misdemeanor, so there's not a felony on my record.
Yeah.
It's sort of, like I'd rather just be out with it, you know. I mean, because the thing is it's like the things I say about myself that are difficult are true, but they're never the whole truth. You know, it's never the thing. It's almost like I share those things so that I don't have to talk about the stuff that's more true, that I don't have to sort of reveal my deepest wound in a way. So what it made me think of is like those things, those deepest wounded parts of ourselves, they can be oddly like these great motivators, like pushing us forward because of all the energy we have to put into trying to pretend something's true about ourselves that might not be true, or trying to make up for some shame we have, some abuse in our history, some, you know, family secret, whatever it is. But that shame can be this odd sort of motivator. It like can propel us in our lives. And I thought, you know, I think if shame could be bottled as an energy source, it could easily replace fossil fuels, because it does like drive us in certain ways. So I just started to think about like what drove this woman to the well at noon, because she wasn't there when the respectable women are there in the morning before it's so hot, you know? And we do know that like she had 5 husbands, and the one she was with is not her husband. We know that, but we don't know why. And I think it's really interesting when you look at women in the Bible, how often men who interpret scripture fill in the blank in really particular ways. So they cast so many women in the role of being a whore when we don't have that information about them. And it's like it's a thing that happens in our culture that women are either virgins or they're whores. And like Jesus' mom was cast in the virgin role, therefore all the other women in the scriptures have to be whores. It's just, it's upsetting to me. And conservative Christian preacher John Piper, I just want to read what he said in one of his sermons about her. Because the fact is, we don't know. We aren't given the information why she has 5 husbands. Like, was she a tramp? Was she a victim? Like, the latter is so much more likely than the former, because she could have been a teenage bride who married an elderly man who died, and then the practice was then she would be the wife of his brother, who was probably also elderly. She could have been divorced for infertility. I mean, it could be that like she would marry men and then like kill them in the first year of marriage, and she just kept getting away with it, I guess. I don't know, like maybe, but it's not that likely. So anyway, so here's what John Piper, this is his treatment of this woman in a sermon. He describes the woman at the well as, quote, a worldly, sensually minded, unspiritual harlot from Samaria. Now tell me that assessment of her doesn't say more about the assessor than it does about the assessed, you know? I can't hear you, you're muted.
I don't want to interrupt you because
You're good.
Yes.
So I just feel
I'm
like
unmuting myself so you can.
if I go my whole life without hearing one more woman-hating interpretation of a Bible verse, I would have already heard too many in my life. Yeah. So it's our duty to sort of go to the text our own damn selves and to see what we find there. So, okay, so all I know is that if we have these wounds that are these propellers in our lives, she had one too. Part of her story was her original wound, just like part of our stories are always our own original wounds. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know why she was there at noon, but if she had that many husbands, I wonder if it's not like the same reason that I never took my children to playgrounds when there were a lot of people there. Like, I wanted my kids to play, but like I also wanted to avoid the other moms because I just never relax around them. I never fit into like mom culture, and I lived in like fear of them inviting me to their conservative Bible study or something. I don't know. I just always thought I was, MOPS group or some shit. So anyway, so I just, I never felt like I could relax around the other women who were at playgrounds with their kids. So I'd take my kids at weird hours. And so I wonder if like she couldn't relax around the women who were still on their first husbands, if that just didn't feel safe. And so I just imagine her approaching the well when she assumed no one would be there. And then there's a man there. And like I imagine her just like trying to not make eye contact. And, and it kind of not working because he starts talking to her. And all that stuff about him having this long theological conversation with her and whatnot is amazing, and it being the longest conversation. But the thing that just kills me is when he says, I present to you living water, and she says, give me this living water. He goes straight for her wound. Like he goes, as soon as she says, I want this living water, he talks about her 5 husbands. Like he wasn't avoiding the subject, he was avoiding the BS. I think he was just going straight for the thing that mattered the most, and seeing her, even the stuff that maybe she wanted to stay hidden. And there's this thing about water, which is that water, as you know, will find the lowest point. Like water always goes to the lowest point in terms of physics. But living water finds you at your lowest point. I mean, I think that that's why we have that water image for Jesus, is that living water will find your lowest point, that thing that you want to keep hidden, the thing you try and make up for. And so to me, all of the things that we think will quench our thirst, you know, all the stuff that we reach for that's not living water, more graduate degrees, more success, making up for the fact that we weren't well parented. I mean, just whatever we think will do it, ends up just creating more thirst and never really quenching it. So anyway, so Catholic theologian James Allison describes faith like not as intellectually assenting to theological propositions, but he describes faith as relaxing. He said faith is relaxing in the presence of God in the way you relax in the presence of someone you're certain is fond of you. Which is so gorgeous. Like when I'm in the presence of someone who I'm certain is fond of me, who I know loves me, that I'm totally secure in that, I'm funnier. I'm like less defended, more passionate. I am genuinely like the best, most authentic version of myself when I'm in the presence of someone I know is fond of me. And so to me, if faith is relaxing, then this detail in this story that I'm so obsessed with is the fact that the Samaritan woman left her jar. She left it there. Like, to me, it's like, to me, the jar represents all the stuff we try to substitute for God. You know, all of the things we try to, that we think might love us, but never can love us back. The stuff we give pieces of our heart to, the shepherd-shaped wolves out there, you know, whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? That like, that we put our hope in, we put our faith in, we put our trust in. And that jar just represents the fact to me, she was so relaxed that she just didn't even realize she left it behind. And so I just think I have a lot of jars I could have just slip from my hand right now, you know? That's what I feel like the woman at the well gives us, is that image of just saying, whatever that is, I can let it go. Whatever that lowest point is, if living water has found it, I don't need well water. I can just leave the jar and walk away. So I just feel like that word is like, no matter what your lowest point is, you can leave the jars. Just leave them, you know? So that's the beauty of the story to me.
Amen. It is a beautiful story. And I'll say, as you were sharing, the thing that I kept thinking about is like, as I've been in quarantine, along with most of the country and even the global community, this actually came out in therapy this week, that my shadow side has come out to play. And, you know, having to deal with the sort of wounds, right? And the sort of like original wounds.
Yeah.
You know, I somehow was too busy to tend to, and too busy to really pay attention to, and too busy to acknowledge, right? Are calling for my attention in the stillness of the quarantine.
Oh.
Hi!
That's my baby puppy. My dog. Do you think your women might want to see the cutie? Look how tiny that. Look at that. God is good.
Oh my God. So,
but your shadow side's coming out because you don't have so many things to distract you from it.
And it's beautiful to hear about the the well, right? As a symbol of all the things that distract us from dealing with it, from dealing with our stuff, right? And then even thinking about well water, right? As the counterfeit to the living water, the substitute, right? I mean, all the substitutes we bring into our lives just to, whatever. And here she is with Jesus and gotten relaxed enough to finally turn her attention to these things in her life that she needs to tend to.
Right.
And
she wasn't trying to hide anymore. I love that she was like, she just went and just started blabbing to the townspeople. She was trying to avoid an hour earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, very much so. Like, he told me everything I did, and
they're looking at her like, you're saying that like it's a good thing.
And what you have prompted is that maybe this was kind of like a reintegration for her, right?
Yes.
And here's this woman that has spent however many years trying to hide out.
Totally.
And because of this interaction, she's like, allow me to reintroduce myself.
Yeah. And I mean, the root of that word salvation, sozo, means wholeness, and like this idea of like, you don't have to hide out. I mean, that's the beautiful thing. I mean, like, I believe in grace so much that I just don't think we should have any shame in admitting why we need it. So there's enough for everyone, there's enough for you, there's enough for me. And like that to me feels like an integrated way of being, instead of thinking all I am is are the things I'm ashamed of. Like, I'm a zero or I'm a hero. Like, I don't, I'm above all of that. And I don't have anything to sort of, ever be ashamed of. We do the hero zero thing, and like neither of those things are true, but what if we integrate like the best part of ourselves and the worst part of ourselves, and try, instead of doing all the PR about how we're only one or the other, because either one of those things, they're both rooted in pride.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
just on different extremes of the spectrum. Exactly. So what would you say, like, there's a Spelmanite and she's watching this conversation right now, and she's had to go back to campus and get all of her stuff because campus is now moving to remote learning, and she's having to make these adjustments. What do you think the woman at the well would say to this young woman?
Well, I think that whatever sort of life-giving aspects you've experienced at Spelman, whatever part of yourself comes alive because you're going to be on campus, that those things are yours to keep even when you're not there. Whatever, if something's come alive in you as a result of these relationships and this context of this campus, that they're yours. It's not like they only will exist in the context that they came alive in. You get to keep them.
Right.
So I just think, I don't know, that idea of her picking up all these different threads of who she was and integrating them into this beautiful tapestry of a whole woman, that's all of our work to do.
It really is. And as you talked about, we don't know the story of why this woman has had so many husbands. And first of all, I have to say, like, you reminded me of this story. Oh God, I think this might even be the first time I'm even talking about this out loud in public. But I was once married, and soon after the divorce was final and everything, I was working, at this church, and one of my former spouses, like good friends, his wife came to church for something that was going on. She was there to support someone and went out of her way to not see me and not speak to me and not acknowledge me. And I got this feeling in that moment, and I think sometimes I still carry it around married people, and I'm not even really friends with any of our old mutual friends anymore, but I sometimes carry like, you know, that way that people who are married look down on people who aren't or are not anymore. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of is like, man, you know, let me go find my single tribe. Like, you know, because there is a certain way that, you know, our culture has lifted up certain institutions and certain places in life as idealistic and the point of it all, right? And if you're not in that category or you're not in that place, there's almost this sort of, you know, like condescension, right? This sort of,
because you're not like a whole person anymore.
Even like a shunning, right? And you know, no one will ever know the intimacies of those stories, but just on the basis of you are no longer in this position, like, you know, and oh God, like that brought that story home to me because, you know, we don't know what happened, right? But we know that whatever it was, you know, this woman probably carried a lot of disappointment. Mm-hmm. She probably carried a lot of, I mean, you talked about an original wound, but there was probably also a wound on top of the wound, and a wound on top of the wound, and another wound on top of the wound. And, you know, maybe one wound per husband, you know.
At least.
So, what would you say to, I mean, I'm not thinking specifically of, you know, our senior class, right, who are not going to be able to have their graduation traditions, and it's still not clear if they're going to have a commencement ceremony and if they're going to be virtual or if they're going to come back for a graduation. There's just, everything is up in the air, but it's nothing like what they've been imagining for the last 4 years.
Yeah. That will continue your whole life. That, like, I imagine this thing. Oh, when I get married, then these things will now be true about me and how happy I am and how complete I feel. When I have career advancements, when I get, you know, when this thing happens. And that's almost never how it unfolds. Mm-hmm. It's just not. That's not how life unfolds. And so, but then also, the joys, the unexpected gifts, the things that actually change you in like redemptive ways, those things that are the most valuable in life never come really from planning for big moments. Do you know what I mean? They come through these smaller moments in our lives. So not that the big things are unimportant, but they never really hold the place that we think they're going to hold in our own spirit's sort of photo album. You know what I mean? Like, it's the smaller things, and those will still happen. They'll still happen. But going back to what you were saying, like, one of the invitations of this story is to think, how do I fill in the blanks about other people's stories? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, if someone says they're getting a divorce, how do I fill in the blanks? Do I start thinking, oh, I wonder if their husband cheated? Do I start thinking, oh, you know what I mean? You make all these assumptions. And the thing I know from being a parish pastor for 10 years, nobody knows another person's marriage. Nobody knows. Because, you know, you'll have a couple in your life who are like the perfect couple. They're the ones who you're like, oh, that's what I want. And then they get divorced and you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. They were the perfect couple. And it's like, nobody knows another person's marriage. Nobody. Yeah. Only those two people. So to have some grace for that, you know, and to allow that people know, you know, what they need. And like, that's not the sort of apex of wholeness, is being married. So, I mean, both of us have more wholeness in our lives than when we were married, you know? So,
Amen, sister.
so yeah.
And I think, you know, we can even generalize that. Like, no one knows anyone else's life.
Yes.
And, you know, we're all great these days at presenting a certain version of ourselves or story of ourselves. You know, social media gives us the ability to do that. But let's also say people have been doing that for social media.
Sure.
And I think one of the things that you said, I mean, it kind of reminds me of conversations that I've been having around this current condition of the world. Like, in addition to all these global struggles, and in addition to this global narrative of trying to survive, right? And people still have their own individual issues and their own individual challenges and their own individual, you know, stuff that they're going through, you know.
Sure.
And, you know, one of the ways that I have just been telling folks, like, to get through this, we're all just going to need to be a little bit more patient with ourselves and a little bit more patient with other people.
Yeah. And to allow for each of us. It's weird because the whole, you know, planet, everybody in the globe is having a certain experience, like we're sharing an experience in a way, and every individual is having their own, you know,
exactly.
like, things
at the same time.
So I think you know, it's important to go like, hey, it's okay. Like, you're disappointed. You might not walk at your graduation. I didn't get to preach at Sister Chapel, you know, things that have been canceled. We don't know what else is going to get canceled. We're sad. People, like the unemployment rates and crazy, all of that stuff is affecting individuals. And for almost everybody, there's so many people who are affected in a way that's worse, but that doesn't mean that the thing that's hard for you isn't hard. That's right.
Is it hard for you?
Totally. And we can have compassion for that. You know, we don't have to do competitive suffering. You know?
Exactly. Like, at least I'm not in Spain, or at least no, honey. Yeah. Whether you are here or there, you are where you are.
Yeah.
And you're feeling what you're feeling. Mm-hmm. And that is okay.
Mm-hmm. 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 And the best thing we can do is to allow that for ourselves and to allow that for the people in our lives, and to notice that beautiful things are still happening. Birds are migrating right now. Like, if you're outside, look up. It's amazing. You know, like, to not reverse the math. Mm-hmm. Just because there's so many hard things, that does not mean that there are only hard things.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I've been trying to be grateful, you know, in my morning practice, to just name 3 things that I'm grateful for, what comes to mind. That's good for me, because I tend to be, you know, a more like, here's all the things that are wrong type of person.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's beautiful things still. We have to be detectives for those things in our lives as well.
Absolutely. And it's an amazing place to kind of wrap, because I think, just very, very similar to what's in the story, you know, there's always good news.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes you have to drop something so that you can pick up the good news. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to drop some anxiety, or sometimes you have to drop an old jar to pick up what God is doing in your life now, right? And would you give our students and viewers a word on how to find the good things and how to see them and how to embrace them?
Yeah, you know, all I know is, for me right now, I really try to check in with, what story am I telling myself about my life? Mm-hmm. What story am I telling myself about who I am?
Mhm.
what I'm worthy of, what I'm not worthy of. Like to really look at the stories I'm telling myself, because the older I get, the more I realize like if so much of my suffering in life comes less from the actual event and
Yeah,
more from the story I'm telling myself about the actual events.
that's it.
You know, and if evangelion, if good news, it has to be sort of we have to be interrupted by it in a sense, right? It's like it's a proclamation that enters in and interrupts the story we're telling ourselves. So to me, it's not just, oh, I'm going to choose to believe this other thing. No, it's an inbreaking into our newscasts that we have going in our minds about what things mean. And those are just stories. They're just thoughts. And
Yeah.
I have a friend who has a mantra, which is so weird, but I try to remember it whenever I can, which is hard, but it is this: yes, thank you. That's it. Something happens, even if it's hard. Yes, thank you. Like there, I trust there will be some life in this, even if it's hard, you know?
That's a word. So, Nadia, yes, and thank you for this virtual experience with the Spelman community, the Sisters Chapel community. This is nothing like what it would have been like in person, but this is just holding the place for that great experience. And I just thank God for all the joy that's being stored up and all the great things that we're all looking forward to on the other side of this. And you know, we're just in a period of just delay, you know, and also just divine pause, you know. And I'm keeping my hope and my joy alive for 2021 Women's History Month when you come to Sisters Chapel.
I'll be there. I can't wait. Thanks. I love you.
Love you too. Mwah. Bye.